Hi, this is Officer Klein with Customs and Border Protection, Anchorage, Alaska. Just checking to see where you're at. We were expecting you 3.5 hours ago, and just checking to see if we need to call out emergency services or anything.
He was a young boy. I'm going to say somewhere around 5 to 6, as I recall. I remember he would sit in here and watch television during the whatever Gulf War that was, and the fighters taking off from the aircrafts, and then up at his barber shop, all the old World War II model airplanes that were hanging from the ceiling.
I remember sitting in the barber shop where they have all the model planes hanging from the ceiling, and was always very interested in flying.
Fly safely. Right? Make sure you're not too high. I'd rather have you land halfway down and stop. On his 14th birthday, he was so accomplished a pilot that I had no qualms about it. I mean, he could have soloed months before that. Legally, he couldn't, but in terms of skill level, he definitely could. From that period on, it was a good relationship. It was a serious, work hard, skill level relationship, and it was a fun relationship.
Here in approximately 15 days, I'm going to be taking off to attempt to become the youngest person to fly an airplane around the world solo. So I currently have around 450 hours in flying, which, you know, for all intents and purposes is not a ton.
A good friend of mine, a partner down in Bakersfield, I talked to him about it, and he told me, I remember one day, he said, Dwight, the air is no different in Fresno as it is in Egypt. You just got to be aware of things.
Around the world, you're going to run into every conceivable kind of weather you can imagine, from snow to icing, thunderstorms, fog, wind shear, weather that changes moment by moment. For the altitude he was flying at, he's still not high enough to be able to get over many of the world's thunderstorms. So my concern again was that no matter where he went, he was going to be surprised by weather.
Action News anchor Jason Oliveira caught up with a 20-year-old college student before he heads out on the mission of a lifetime.
Jack Wiegand is not your typical 20-year-old. It's safe to say the Bullard High grad has loftier goals than most people his age.
Starting May 1st, I'm going to attempt to be the youngest person to solo an airplane around the world.
Yeah, you heard him right. In a little more than 2 weeks, Jack is hoping to soar his way into the Guinness Book of World Records.
If I'm back before my 21st birthday on June 22nd, then I will have the record when I am 20 years old.
With 600 flight hours already under his belt, Jack is a veteran in the cockpit. Jack says his parents are supportive of his record-breaking mission, even if it means he'll spend 40 to 50 days flying around the world by himself.
It was one of those times when you think, oh gosh, did I do the right thing? Should I have let him do this? Because anything can happen up there. We were all pretty emotional when he left, just waving goodbye. I'll never forget that.
I have believed that if you can do anything you put your mind to, and you know, I really want everyone to take that message to heart, because you really can, and this is proof. I landed in Canada. I was ecstatic that I made my first international crossing. You know, I thought, hey, I can do this. This is pretty easy. This isn't bad at all. I got out of the airplane and they asked me for my passport.
And I remember Irene calling me and saying, Dwight, do you think you know where Jack's passport is?
And as I'm on this walk, I get a phone call from him. He goes, I called everybody, nobody could find it. One other place you may want to look is the copier.
But when Jack arrived in Canada, he discovered to his horror that the wallet for his passport was empty. After an hour of pulling the plane apart, it was good old Mum who came to the rescue 3,000 miles away after finding it on the photocopier. Now he's keeping a firm hold on it.
When I got there yesterday, they didn't even ask to look at my passport. And I explained, you know, I'd been hanging out in Canada for 4 days to get the passport. It was just kind of a funny instance. It's approximately 2 hours out, about 150 miles south of the
Iranian-Pakistani border. I was talking to Oman Approach. Everything was going fine with the flight at that time, but he called me up on the radio and he said, November 432 Bravo Golf, you have an airplane moving from your 9 o'clock to your 3 o'clock, 14,500. Here I am in the middle of the ocean, and I think, there should definitely not be another airplane flying 500 feet below me. I keep calling Oman Approach, are you sure there's another airplane? Am I being intercepted? What do I need to do?
In that case, the procedure is to maintain your course, maintain your heading, maintain the airspeed, and watch what happens and try to establish radio contact.
He said, this airplane is not in my airspace. I have no control over it. Whatever happens, happens.
Over there, I guess I was as surprised as anyone when that jet intercepted him, because I don't know where it came from, and I don't think Jack knew where it came from either.
I finally spotted him. It was an F-18 fighter jet that was flying right under me, in front of me, and it came around and followed me for about 15, 20 minutes. All that I was thinking about was, okay, shoot, maybe I broke some airspace rule. Maybe I'm in an area that I shouldn't be, and this airplane is going to shoot me out of the sky right now.
Maybe it was an American military jet off an aircraft carrier, but I don't know where that aircraft originated from.
The entire flight from Mumbai to Calcutta was beautiful until just about 20 to 30 miles before, and I had a system on my GPS that showed me where lightning was striking. And I saw on this system that lightning was striking at the airport, just 20 miles ahead that I need to be at.
The problem with thunderstorms is they can range up so strong that they produce tornadoes, and those kinds of thunderstorms are thunderstorms that not too many airplanes can survive going into.
And that was the single most terrifying moment of my flying career, was trying to descend around these thunderstorms into the airport.
Now, Jack was again familiar with thunderstorms. He knew how high they could be. He knew how they were situated. As a glider pilot, he could also understand what he needed to do to navigate around weather.
I remember watching him on my iPad, and he was going right and left and around and making circles. And I said, Irene, I wonder what the heck is going on here.
Over in that country, if you don't have a radar system in your airplane, which I did not, you're flying in the blind, essentially.
He was following a procedure that a glider pilot would follow in order to be able to continue on course in the face of thunderstorm.
And I saw just kind of a big pocket in the sky that went straight towards the ground. And I said, okay, well, I need to kind of get through this small pocket here. So I told Calcutta Approach, I said, hey, I need to make 360s here until I can get to 2,000 feet below the cloud layer, and they approved that. So what I did is I just essentially turned the engine off to try and lose as much altitude as I possibly could. I retarded the throttle. I threw out the flaps to kind of slow me down and increase drag, and I put my gear down to also increase drag, and I just circled around there for probably was about 5 or 6 circles, and I just kind of dove right down through that pocket in the sky, and then just got under it and flew to the airport. Challenged every single skill that I had ever practiced in aviation. That flight did.
That's when we realized this trip was a lot more dangerous than we thought, that we ever imagined.
A father from Indiana and his teenage son, who were flying around the world to set a record, have crashed in the South Pacific. NBC's Tom Costello is in Washington with more. Tom, good morning.
Hi, Willie. They were in a single-engine propeller plane, having already flown more than halfway around the world, departing American Samoa at night when their flight ended in tragedy. For 17-year-old Horace Suleiman, the trip was all about doing something very big with his dad Barber sitting right beside him. On June 19th, their journey began, but only 17 minutes after departure, their plane went down. The Coast Guard recovered Horace's body 23 miles offshore. Barber still missing. Back in Indiana, the Suleiman family had hoped to celebrate their return this Saturday.
I talked with Babar for months leading up to his flight. I gave him as much advice as I possibly could. I told him what to expect. I tried to give him contacts of people to get in touch with. So I think he had done his due diligence when it came to planning an around the world flight. You know, what happened with them was a tragedy, to say the least, and I think it opened everyone else's eyes up to how dangerous, you know, taking an around the world flight can be. The flight I had ahead of me was one of the most difficult flights of the trip, if not of my life. And I ended up getting delayed in Japan for 3 weeks.
Only time of his trip where he was going to be faced with 2,000 miles of open ocean. There are no islands at all between the island of Hokkaido and the Aleutian Islands, which is where he was headed. So first of all, he's going to be doing this at night because he wants to arrive in the Aleutian Islands in the daytime. Secondly, he's going to one of the world's worst weather areas. The Aleutian Islands have probably one of the worst areas for weather anywhere in the world. Third, again, it's at night. Fourth, you have storms that are coming out of the Russian Sea of Aralsk. Day after day after day, these storms kept coming down out of that sea and passing across his route of flight.
I was at the airport for 6-7 hours leading up to that flight. I was planning everything, double, triple, checking everything, and just a minute before I'm supposed to take off, I decide I don't want to because of a gut feeling.
His frustration level was escalating every day when he couldn't leave, as my fear was what he was getting into. We always were trying to get somewhere else.
And I was a little bit hesitant, but it looked to me like his only chance to go was the fact that the system coming out of the sea at Aralsk was slow enough so that it wasn't going to block his route. And then we had this other system coming up from the North Pacific that was not going to be getting in his way.
I took off that night. Visibility was terrible. Probably didn't have more than 100 feet of ceiling, maybe a half-mile visibility in front of me. So I took off, climbed through the clouds, put the gear up, started climbing out, and immediately, no more than 10 seconds after I took off, I was over water. And that was kind of where I was going to be living for the next 12 hours.
And probably more than 30 minutes into the flight, he talked to me on the telephone and said he was running into snow and some icing, and it looked like he was running into weather.
I remember looking out at the wing and just seeing something go by the wing, and I realized after a little bit that it was snowing. Here I was over the middle of the Pacific, and it started snowing around me.
And at that point in time, it sounded like he wanted to turn around and come back. But I'm looking at the weather screen on my computer, and I'm saying to him, Jack, I think you should go with it, stay on that heading you've got, and I think you'll get through it.
My HF radio didn't work the entire trip. It had been a whole thing, big challenge because I wasn't able to use this thing. And just the way it was installed, it just never worked the entire flight. He said, okay, if your HF radio does not work, you have to return to Japan immediately. And I thought, you know what, I've been in Japan for the last 3.5 weeks. I'm not returning to Japan. They said, okay, if you don't want to communicate HF, then you're on your own. You're VFR, and we're not communicating with you.
This is what the sunrise looks like over the North Pacific Ocean. I'll show you the position where I am right now. You can see I'm more than halfway. This is the Kamchatka Peninsula. You go west here. This is Japan, where I came from. And I am crossing over the middle of nowhere right now in the ocean. You can see as you zoom in, I'm getting closer to the Aleutian Island chain right here. This is convincing because if I have to, from Carto, I can always divert to Shemya, Alaska. But if everything looks good, which it does right now, knock on wood, I can go all the way to Adak. I've got great tailwinds the entire way, 74 knots currently. I've been smoking across the ocean here. Hope it keeps up like this. Look forward to getting to Adak and visiting the Aleutians. I'm very, very excited. Approximately 3 hours and 30 minutes to Adak.
It was a situation where he had just enough time to get between them, and because the two systems were rotating opposite one another, they provided a huge tailwind through this very narrow channel between the two systems, enough for him to launch himself through there.
I really went right in between two very large storm systems, you know. Had I gone through any one of those storm systems, it could have been a much worse outcome.
Without a tailwind, he would have been forced to land through the fog in Attu, and that would have been really, really dangerous.
I knew that, okay, because I had these tailwinds that allowed me to go further, I have to take advantage of it, and I have to go on to Dutch Harbor. So I took another 3 hours and was able to make it to Dutch Harbor. I got to Dutch Harbor with, you know, only about 14 gallons of fuel left in the tank. You know, the plane holds 130. You talk about only having 14 gallons left. That's not very much. 14 gallons of fuel probably would have lasted me around an hour. But an hour to go where, you know? Right. Dutch Harbor was the only airport within a few hundred miles that had avgas, the kind of gas that I needed.
To me, that was by far the scariest part of the entire flight.
You know, 58 or 59 days later, it was, you know, it's kind of just backing up in my mind, you know, yes, having bad weather to land in St. Louis, he told me, the passport issue, you know, the issues he had in India that he touched on a little bit, being intersected by the fighter F-18 or 15, whatever it was, over the Gulf was, you know, he's going to make it. He's going to get this done.
During the entire flight, I would always kind of envision what it would be like to come back to Fresno.
I'm about 15 minutes outside of Fresno. Feels good to be back in the valley. Feels good to be getting close to home. I'll turn the video back on when I land. Check it out.
We set up a pretty good welcoming with the fire department out there with the water arch for him to roll under when he got there.
I turn in, I see two fire trucks, and I knew exactly what that was for right when I saw them, but I thought, wow, this is, you know, such an honor to have this happen. So I was just ecstatic to be back, ecstatic to see everyone, so happy to just kind of be home again. It was definitely worth it, but it was only worth it because I was successful with it. It was worth it because it's done, and I don't have to do it every single day. But would I do it again? Probably not. No time soon, at least.